And welcome back to the Hot Lap. Welcome back to our qualifying report. Welcome. This is the grid. Well done. Absolutely. Carlos Sainz on pole. I tell you what, Carlos Sainz could be Monza Mayor Italian president, I'd imagine, today. Obviously, despite being Spanish, I don't know what the rules are. But I'm pretty sure most of the country probably vote for him. He has stopped Max Verstappen getting another pole. So we've had, I think, Carlos Sainz, Leclerc and Hamilton stopping Red Bull, in short, getting that pole position here at Monza when I thought it was going to happen. I know Ferrari ended up putting, a new engine, brand new engine, loads of new things on their car, which they planned for. They are rapid. They have a good straight line speed. And let's look forward to the race. Once again, I think a lot of people are thinking Red Bull are favourite, but we've got to get past that first corner first, don't we? So, let's go to the back of the grid and then look at our disappointments. Lance Stroll. Yeah. Is this the end of Lance? Is this the beginning, or has the beginning already begun of the end of the Lance Stroll saga in Formula One? You really have to start to wonder, getting a few more weekends like this. Kevin Magnussen in the Haas Ferrari, 19th. I mean, his teammate is up there in 13th. He was only, to be fair, he was only, I think, in Q1, a couple of tenths off, as you can see. He was only a couple of tenths off his teammate anyway, but obviously enough to not get out. But the biggest surprises are Alpine, Pierre Gasly, and Esteban Ocon in the Alpine Renaults. There was some talk of them trying to do some kind of tow, but it didn't quite work. But, well, let's be honest, they're only 3 thousandths apart, but something definitely didn't work for the Alpines, as they're 17th and 18th respectively. Zhou, 16th in the Alfa Romeo, really, really sad. Let's be honest, one of the nicest liveried car, I think, this weekend. Only 14th and 16th, with Bottas 14th. So you kind of guess that's about probably where they were. I mean, Logan Sargent, you got your teammate in 6th, Logan, and 15th, not really doing enough to justify next year, is he? This was the one race where a lot of people thought, yes, potentially he could, but no. Oh well. Bottas, as we've already spoken about. Nico Hülkenberg in the Haas Ferrari. I mean, the one good thing about the Haas is it switched on its tyres. They had the hard, so I was really disappointed that for Haas, that both Haas's did not get through in that Q1 when they're both using the hards, because they can switch on the tyres like that. But there we go, and they're using the same engine as the pole position. However, it may not be a new engine, as we've just discussed, Ferrari having their new stuff in there. Liam Lawson, 12th, 1 place behind Tsunoda. Couple of tenths off, ish, let's say, but oh my gosh, has he really, really shown everyone what he can do. I mean, when Ricciardo does come back, and I think he will this year, pressure is on Daniel Ricciardo. I think he needs to obliterate Tsunoda to potentially get in the Red Bull, and at absolute minimum, he needs to beat Tsunoda in most of the sessions towards the end of the year to justify his position, because Liam Lawson is grabbing 2 hands. Could we be in a position where, if Liam Lawson starts, for example, they go to the next race and qualifies Tsunoda in what is a quite difficult Grand Prix down at Singapore? Goodness knows what's going to happen. But it's exciting for us to watch. Nerve-wracking, I think, if you are a Tsunoda and Ricciardo fan. Exciting, I think, if you're a Liam Lawson fan at the moment. But 10th, Fernando Alonso, slowest in the Aston and out in Q3, the fastest Aston Martin, of course. But really, really slow. I'm not too sure what happened to him. But Lando Norris, 9th. I mean, Lando Norris beaten by a couple of tenths by Oscar Piastri. Well done. And another disappointment, Lewis Hamilton in 8th. He just, when they got to this circuit, it just felt since about Q1, something, he wasn't quite happy with the car. And he's talking about the back end, the rear end of the car, isn't he? Piastri in 7th. What a fantastic qualifying for him. Really, really good. I think, given there are doubts about the McLaren going into it, that's about as good as you're going to get there. Well done. But I think the winner of qualifying is Carlos Sainz being one of them, but the joint winner, 6th, Alexander Albon. This time you couldn't rely on a drying track, but genuinely 6th in that Williams. Let's hope for points in the race. potentially big points. Maybe there's a bit of an instant at the first corner. Williams podium, maybe. That'd be amazing, wouldn't it? But there we go. Now, Sergio Perez, you'd normally be disappointed with fifth. However, he's only what? He's only about 3-4 tenths off his teammate-ish. And that's not too bad, I think, for Perez, given he's 1.3 seconds off his teammate at Zandvoort. But it wasn't enough to get second. And this therein lies the problem. Being 3-4 tenths off your teammate, in potentially, say like next year is a competitive year in terms of races as well, that's not going to be good enough, is it? But I do think, well, let's just say for Perez's sake, a lot better than Zandvoort. George Russell, fourth in the Mercedes. I mean, brilliant. Well done. I did not think Mercedes would get on these front two rows. So big ups for George Russell. Disappointing for Charles Leclerc. However, in third, I think a lot of people felt that it was Carlos Sainz that seemed to have the advantage all weekend. And reportedly, Charles Leclerc was not amazingly happy with his car and his setup. So he went to Sainz's setup and, hey, presto, it worked. Third, I mean, less than a tenth off pole. Max Verstappen beaten, but I don't think he'll be too disappointed. I think he knows how fast his car is in the race. And I think Ferrari could struggle to win, but never say never. Things happen at Monza, as we know. With obviously Carlos Sainz on pole. He's been fast all weekend. If he can keep it, that'll be great. If you can break the DRS toe by lap 2, that will be even better. And if the Ferraris can maintain first and third, or even if they lose the lead, but be in with a few seconds of Max Verstappen, without Perez being up there, they could play the strategy card and go either way in the strategy, therefore kind of boxing Max Verstappen in and forcing him to pick something which may not be the winning strategy. But interestingly, Ferrari were investigated because at the beginning of, just before the beginning of qualifying, there was a maximum lap time, I think, of a 1:41 that you had to do to avoid any slow moving traffic, let's say. However, Ferrari, both Ferrari drivers, I believe in Q1, went very much against that. I think by 2 seconds, about half a second respectively, for Leclerc and Sainz. But they didn't get a penalty. So Ferrari explained why Sainz and Leclerc escaped a sanction for driving too slow. This is on motorsport.com. It said it was made clear that only in exceptional circumstances, as accepted by the stewards, would drivers escape being deemed to have committed an offence. As we know, as I said, the maximum 1 minute 41. However, analysis of the lap times in Q1 showed that both Leclerc and Sainz delivered very slow outlaps prior to their final runs. Now, Leclerc was a 150.286, while Sainz was a 158.4. Wow, so that's a lot slower, isn't it? So both almost certainly, I thought it was only a bit, but so both almost certainly breached the time between the safety car lines at the other end of the pits. So that was a lot more than I initially figured or had been told. So the FIA had initially stated that both drivers' actions would be investigated after qualifying, but shortly after Sainz grabbed pole position, it was announced no further action. Although there's been no formal explanation from the FIA, Ferrari team principal Fred Vasseur has explained. He said that the drivers have been told that the need to keep below the lap time delta would not take precedent over the need for them to make sure they gave way to rivals coming through on flying laps. For both Sainz and Leclerc, it was giving way to faster cars that meant they slowed down. Now, speaking to Sky, Vasseur said it was by regulation you are allowed to exceed if you slow down to let someone go, and that's what happened. Had the stewards taken away pole position in the 2023 season, where Red Bull are absolutely dominating at Monza, at Ferrari, would those marshals they need a secret tunnel, I'd imagine, to get out of Monza. But here on Race Fans, we've got double Q1 elimination, not good enough for Alpine, say Gasly and Ocon. Now, both Alpine drivers, as we know, they were eliminated. They failed to progress out of the first phase of qualifying. Gasly 17th, just 0.003 of a second quicker than his teammate. Now, neither driver appeared inside the top 10 positions in any of the practice sessions. Gasly said, unfortunately, all weekend I was quite happy with the car balance, but we've just been 2 seconds off the pace the whole time. We knew coming here Monza it would be the toughest weekend of the year, he went on to say, with all these long straights, and it's clearly been the case. We expected to be out in Q1, but you always have optimism that maybe with the hard tyre or something you could get through. But that's all we had. Unfortunately, it's been difficult so far. Now, Ocon believes both he and Gasly went fast as it was possible for them to go in qualifying. He's saying, today was not good enough. I tried to push the car a lot in turn 1, picked up a bit of floor damage for run 2. It wasn't ideal, that's Ocon. But all in all, being 3,000 lengths apart, you kind of got to say, is that they're so close, is that the maximum of the car? Someone who's also, I've got to think Russell's happy, but Russell's improved his qualifying form, again on Race Fans, this story, by accepting the pace of the car. George Russell says he turned around his recent dip in form qualifying by accepting the limits of the car. The Mercedes driver encountered some setbacks in qualifying prior to the summer break. For example, he failed to make the cut in Q3, the Austrian Grand Prix, and then eliminated in Q1 in Hungary. He has fared better since the summer break, taking third on the grid last week and qualifying on the second row again here. He said, I'm really pleased with my own personal performance for these first 2 races, he said, back to my levels of the first 6 races. I lost my way a bit before the break, he admitted, so I'm really happy with P4. We set the car up a bit more for the race because we weren't expecting to be as quick as a team as we were, and it's a great place to start. Russell said it had been necessary for him to accept that the car can only perform at a certain level on the different tyre compounds. The Mercedes, as we know, is less competitive on the hard tyres in Q1 than it was on the softs in Q3. He said the tyres are a huge factor. I've slightly gone back to basics and not tried to reinvent the wheel with setups and just accepting the pace of the car. He said P4 was the maximum potential today, but I went in trying to do a lap for pole, trying to get those extra tenths. But he said, I went in trying to get pole, those extra tenths, I'd have ended up in the gravel because 3 tenths extra is not just possible. We know how important the tyres are. This is a prime example. Q1 he was P13, and Q3 he ended up P4, and the only thing that changed is the tyres. Hamilton, well, let's just say a lot more disappointed than Paul Young, let's say Russell, but Lewis Hamilton said he found it hard to get the best out of the car in qualifying. He said he'll start tomorrow's race 4 places behind his teammate George Russell, though there's been less than 2 tenths between them in Q3. He said, I lost it all in the second or last sector. I was up in the first and a bit in the second, and I was struggling with the car. He said yesterday, the car hasn't responded the way he expected to set up. He said, our car in general is very hard to optimise. There's nothing easy about this car. The Mercedes has appeared less competitive low downforce track this year. Hamilton took a surprise pole at the Hungaroring, which requires high downforce level, 3 races ago. Up until Budapest, it was looking quite good. The tyres play a big factor, and these past 2 rounds we've just been so-so. The qualifying session was definitely harder than normal. And Toto Wolff, team principal, said previous races indicated they wouldn't be as strong as Monza. We were 1.2 seconds off last year, he said. We knew that low downforce wouldn't suit us at Spa and Baku. The car should be quick everywhere, but these were the problematic tracks, and considering the time gap from our quicker car to the front guys, I think we've got more reason to be semi-satisfied. I think they have to, with Russell P4. Now, as we did a story about Lewis Hamilton saying that Max Verstappen had, on the whole, he has slower teammates than Lewis, which I think most people will look at as a fact. Hamilton has had 3 world champions to go up against. Okay. However, Max Verstappen suggests Lewis Hamilton is jealous. This is on SkySports.com, Sky F1, is jealous of his success following comments from his rival. Hamilton said he's no more impressed by Verstappen than former champions. Max Verstappen has responded ahead of Verstappen attempting to seal this 10th record successive victory. Hamilton told Sky Italy that he was no more impressed by the Dutchman than the sport's former world champions, and that Red Bull's success was blown up much more than his own. Verstappen has dominated this year to the point that with 9 races remaining, it's a matter of when, not if, he will claim that 3rd world title. Maybe he's a little jealous of my current success, Verstappen said to the Dutch media, including Racing News 365, after qualifying 2nd. This kind of statement, he possibly thinks he's winning something with that, but it makes no difference to me. I think Mercedes have a very hard time dealing with losing after all these years of winning so much. Hamilton was controversially, as we know, denied that 2021 championship, which we all like to talk about. However, following the introduction of these new regulations, they've really struggled. And the Verstappen has said at some point you have to be realistic, and then you have to be able to appreciate what other teams are doing. We did the same when they were dominant, and we also said we have to work harder because we are not good enough. You can keep shouting and screaming that what we do is not that special. You just have to deal with yourself. So there we go. Very explicit coming from Verstappen. I think even Verstappen has to admit that he's had less experience. I mean, he hasn't had any world champions as teammate. Not to say he's any less faster than Lewis Hamilton. And I think it's a difficult one, isn't it? I think when you look at Mercedes and when you look at the Rosberg years, I do think that the team was split 50-50 in terms of Rosberg Hamilton. When you look at Bottas was able to beat Hamilton on the track and in some occasionally in the races. However, I can't help but feel that I think 100% of the time, I think after his first 2 years at Red Bull are 100% behind Verstappen. Even more so, I think, than Mercedes were behind Hamilton a lot of the time. There have been occasions though where I may well be wrong in that, because when you look at Mercedes, I think Valtteri had to give up a win potentially to let Hamilton through in Russia. Forgot what year, maybe 2018, 2019. But it's so difficult, isn't it? But I do think Hamilton has had harder teammates. I would pick in general. I mean, yeah, you got your Heikki Kovil Islands. Okay, I give that. But then I would currently choose George. I think most people would choose George Russell over Sergio Perez, for example. But there we go. And that's it for the main parts of the news. Who is going to win? I mean, you still got to think a Red Bull is potentially going to win this race. But, they've got a history of winning. It's potentially going to be 10 in a row. If anyone can stop them, it's probably going to be Sainz and Leclerc or something happening at the first corner. It wouldn't surprise me if George Russell gets on the podium. I imagine Sergio Perez is another podium favourite. I'd love Alex Albon to get on there. Interesting to see what McLaren can do and how far up Hamilton can get. Can he get past Alex Albon? If you remember in Canada, even with DRS, people were struggling to get past that Williams. And what's going to happen further down? I mean, it's going to be really interesting to see how Lawson does. Can he get in the top 10? Can he get points? That would be fantastic, can he? What could Fernando Alonso do from there? I mean, there's a couple of times where that Aston Martin, the practice sessions, looked quite handy. And last Stroll, let's say. Lol. What's he going to do in what is really a car that should be in the top 10? But there we go. And essentially, this has been the Hot Lap. We will speak to you soon. I just need a